We compared clinical manifestations, histopathological changes, tissue mRNA expression, serum levels of cytokine, chemokine, troponin. Troponin indicates heart damage or heart muscle damage in mice, the intravenous versus intramuscular vaccine injections, and they had a placebo, which was the normal saline control, which is good, okay? You have a placebo to control for that. That's a decent, well-conducted study. So what they noticed is only in the intravenous group developed histopathological changes in myopericarditis as evidenced by cardiomyocyte degeneration. Okay, let's just break that down right there before we keep going. Myopericarditis. Myo means muscle. It also talks about the myocardium. So it's a part of the heart between the epicardium, which is the outer layer of the heart, and the endocardium, which is the inner layer of the heart. So we have myopericarditis. Pericardium is the outermost layer of the heart that encases the heart, almost like a protection layer. And so, okay, we know where it's happening. What they looked at was cardiomyocyte degeneration. Cardio means heart. Myo means muscle, muscle site. Okay, so it's muscle cells of the heart, degeneration, apoptosis, which means the process of cell death, and necrosis, which is basically the output. It's like you go through apoptosis and you get necrosis at the end, where it's like, imagine frostbite. The last stage of frostbite is necrosis, where the tissue is just dead and your fingers or limb is about to fall off or falling off. With adjacent inflammation, cell infiltration, and calcific, deposits. So calcium deposits, which is going to affect the ability for the heart's ability to contract, expand, relax. Okay? Pardon me. On visceral pericardium. Fortunately, evidence of coronary artery or other cardiac pathologies was absent. So good news there. But other news is that we see a whole cascade of inflammatory pathways being generated, which we'll talk about here, which for up to 2 weeks, they were markedly aggravated by intramuscular or intravenous booster dose. So they did it again. They did a booster dose then. And they wanted to see, does the booster dose, what does that cause now? So one, we've noticed all these cascades of apoptosis, inflammation, myopericarditis from intravenous injection, which is happening almost, we do not have evidence for this, like we don't know for certain, but statistically, it's bound to happen. I would put all my money that this has happened thousands of times across the world. Why? Because human error and ignorance. How many doctors and nurses are not aspirating? I don't know. Likely a lot. More than we think. Why? Because the WHO, World Health Organization, and CDC don't even recommend these precautionary measures during intramuscular vaccine administration, even though Pfizer and Moderna have clearly stated that their vaccine should only be given via intramuscular route. Of course they do. That's going to cover their base. Why wouldn't they? But the CDC and WHO no longer recommend it. Why are we not ensuring correct administration? That's asinine. CDC Pink Book 2020 and WHO 2015 position paper actually are against aspiration. Why? To minimize pain. Boo-boo's in too much pain. And again, here's another big confounding variable that could invalidate some of the data around adverse events. Because what if we then stratify the data to be, okay, how many people were given it intramuscularly versus intravenously? We'll never know that answer, but here's just a potential ramification. Okay, let's take a breath. Cardiac tissue. So let's back up a little bit. They did another dose, almost like a booster shot, okay? They did a booster shot, intramuscular and intravenous. What they noticed is in both cases, cardiac tissue mRNA expression of all these inflammatory pathways, IL-1, TNF-alpha, IL-6, they increased significantly in the intravenous group, but not in the intramuscular group, compatible with the presence of myopericarditis in the intravenous group. Okay. What they also noticed is this spike protein. Okay, because where's the spike protein going? Okay, so people, the concern of the spike protein is just, floating around in the body, right? It's not supposed to, theoretically, And Dr. Roger Shrell, Dr. Roger Patrick have discussed this a little bit in depth about what's supposed to happen as a result of the immune system seeing this spike protein. It's supposed to basically destroy it and degrade it entirely. However, could this be undermined by the fact that if a vaccine is administered intravenously improperly, could it lead to spike protein being expressed in different organs? Here's potentially why that could be. So what we saw in mice is that the antigen, which stimulates, it's like the threat that stimulates antibodies to be produced, the antigen was occasionally seen in hepatocytes of the intravenous group, but not intramuscular group. This is very interesting. Hepatocytes are liver cells. Pardon me. So via serum injection, serum means blood, got into the blood, okay? So intravenously, got injected accidentally in people, in purpose in the study, gets injected into the blood, then it gets into myocardial and liver cells. Once it's there, the liver and heart produce the spike protein. It expresses that to their cell surface. It detects the foreign protein. It creates an immune response, attacks the cell because it's a foreign substance particle compound that it wants to destroy. As a result, we cause a cascade of inflammatory processes as a result of the trying to destroy the foreign pathogen, hence myocarditis. Could this partly explain why some people could this explain some adverse events that are related to fertility, that are related to ovaries, that are related to degeneration of, or just temporary acute inflammatory responses in other organ tissues? Maybe. I don't have an answer. We don't have an answer. I'm just posing questions that could potentially explain some of the things we're seeing. Limitations. It's in mice. You won't see human clinical trial because it's unethical, like I said. It's not peer-reviewed. But what other adverse events could be exacerbated or triggered by intravenous administration versus intramuscularly? This is an important question to consider. The conclusions of this study that the brief withdrawal of syringe plunger to exclude blood aspiration may be one possible way to reduce such risk. But when the WHO and CDC do not even recommend this, when the Australian government do not recommend this, then we must put the onus on the individual then to take responsibility for their own health through knowledge, through education. One, if you are going to get a vaccine at any point in your lifetime, particularly this one, it would benefit you to ask them to aspirate. You cap the downsides.